Okay, let's get some political reaction now. Is the military taking strong enough and fast enough action to end sexual misconduct? What leadership should the government take on the issue? Joining me now from the House of Commons, John McKay, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence, Conservative Defence critic James Bezan, and NDP Defence critic Randall Garrison. Nice to see you all, gentlemen.
Good to see you.
I'm going to get you to cover a couple of topics. Let's start with the one we were just talking about there. Some numbers out of the military's progress report on sexual misconduct. Just to highlight them again, 247 calls to the centre, 100 complaints of sexual assault or harassment, and 8 investigations. John McKay, does that surprise you? Do you think that this is showing that the military has taken the right action? Give me your sense on what you take from that.
Well, I think the military is taking this very seriously. This has become a very serious issue for the Chief of Defence Staff, Jonathan Vance. He sees it first and foremost as an ethical issue, but he also sees it as an operational issue, that if in fact there are things going on in the military that make operations more difficult, he wants to make sure he gets at it. So he's appointed Lieutenant General Whitecross, who, if you've ever interviewed her before, I know that she is probably the ranking, well, I know she is the ranking female in the military, and she is one no-nonsense person, and she set up a system which is yielding some results. I don't know what to think of the numbers, to be candid about it. There's 68,000 people in the military, and I don't know whether that is a big number or a small number, or whether it shows any pattern whatsoever. So I think we have to hold judgment on that.
Okay, James Bezan, from your perspective, I mean, this started under your government, and I know that everyone has concerns around it. But do you think that the numbers indicate that there is a willingness to at least talk about or call someone if people have concerns?
I think the numbers are actually very encouraging, Rosie. If you look at the time frame that the Sexual Misconduct Response Center was set up to help with everything from public awareness and education and outreach, and people wanting to receive medical and mental health care, all that is there, along with the more serious allegations that come forward in sexual assault, and as we know, 8 of those are being investigated. So just in a matter of a few short months, I think that it shows that the need was definitely there, and it shows that we have a process in place. I want to give kudos to both General Jonathan Vance and Lieutenant General Christine Whitecross for doing such a superb job in accepting all 10 recommendations that Justice Madame Deschamps brought forward. And then in the report that released today, they addressed each and every one of those recommendations and how they're implementing it over the 4 stages.
Okay.
So I think it is moving in the right direction. And of course, the big question in the report and the big question through all this is the frequency that we get the reports. I'd like to see them done quarterly rather than semi-annually. Yeah. And the final one is that no one in the Canadian Armed Forces deserves any form of sexual harassment or sexual assault. We don't need sexual terrorism within the service, and so it is important that we go forward and change the culture within national defense.
Okay, that's some strong language around what you think is happening inside the military there. Randall Garrison, your thoughts on whether this indicates that we're at the beginning of some sort of cultural change inside the military?
Well, I think this is one of those moments that are all too rare, where we have some agreement among the political parties that we're off to a good start here.
We'll change that in a moment.
Well, we're off to a very good start here, and the number of people who are in touch with the response center indicates that there's been a change in the climate, so people do feel that they can come forward. On the larger question of cultural change, I'm a little worried about 2 things. One is the lack of commitment for resources to go forward in the future. I worry we will lose momentum that's already built up. And the second is, one of the big things about changing the culture of any organization is having a critical mass of women in that organization. And the Canadian Human Rights Commission recommended the target for recruitment in the Canadian Forces be 25% women. We're only at 15% now. Yeah. And the Conservative government said that was way too high. They couldn't possibly meet that. So I'm looking for a commitment from the government on the long term that we will get more women into the Canadian military and help change the culture that way.
Yeah, and that does seem to be something General White Cross is also focused on. Okay, I want to switch topics and do one round on something you're not going to agree on. I already know that in advance, and that's the air campaign against ISIS. As you all know, there have been questions about, specifically why Canada is pulling these 6 planes out and what the role will be going forward. But the Prime Minister got an interesting question last night from Peter Mansbridge when he was asked very directly, are you morally opposed to bombing? And here's what he said.
Are you morally opposed to bombing?
No, I think as has been done in the past, you make decisions on a case-by-case basis as to where and how to engage Canadian troops. There's no more important choice that has so many lives on the line than the decision by a government to send troops into harm's way. And how we do that and what we do to best achieve the outcomes and the help that we want to offer is an ongoing and very, very particular to the particular circumstances.
Okay, so John McKay, if bombing is not a moral issue, it's not that your government doesn't think that bombing works, what is the holdup in A, announcing when the planes are coming out, and B, announcing what you are going to do instead of that? Because I know the foreign minister is, off in Rome, going to be talking to people, and we still don't really have a clear picture. So what's the reason for the planes coming out, and what's going to go in their place?
Well, you'll recollect, Rosie, that the Prime Minister's position was out there, if you will, well before the election. And it was in contrast to the then government's position. The people of Canada made a choice on October the 19th, and they obviously preferred the Prime Minister's position over the former Conservative government. So we therefore have a mandate to change the mission, and we have a mandate to get the mission right. And the minister and the Prime Minister and have been back and forth over this, both with visits, but also with visits with our allies. And the minister is clearly giving some indications over the last few weeks that the mission will change, and it will change in a manner that he hopes will be more effective.
Sure, but what is it about this particular mission that for your government means that bombing is not the right answer?
I think bombing has, in fact, achieved some level of success, but it's achieved a level of success that is, in some respects, in a holding pattern. You now need to make significant changes as to how you approach ISIS, ISIL, Daesh, whatever you wish to call it. And he is indicating that you have to look at it with a different set of lenses, look at what the core issues are, that this is, in fact, basically a criminal organization with a religious veneer on it. And so you have to think about how you approach the resolution of this conflict going forward. And so we want to make a serious contribution. We don't want a gap between what the previous and current mission is. And so when we do go forward, we will have for the Canadian people what we hope to be a very effective response.
Okay, James Bezan, what do you make of that? And particularly this language now, this is the second time we've heard this from the government about this being a criminal organization with religious overtones, and I guess the explanation the Prime Minister gave last night.
Well, I find the Prime Minister's comments, again, just continues to add to the confusion. If they're not morally opposed to bombing, then here we have one of the most notorious and disgusting terrorist organizations that the world has ever witnessed, and that they are committing mass atrocities, targeting women, targeting religious and ethnic minorities, and the gay and lesbian community. Everything that these guys are doing is just terrible and despicable, and they do it under a name of a very twisted ideology. And are they criminal? Of course they're criminal. Are they committing war crimes? And they need to be held to account for that. But at the same time, if we're going to defeat ISIS, if we're going to have any hope of taking back territory, you have to continue on with the air combat mission. I'm waiting to see what the government's coming forward with. They keep speculating on bits and pieces in the public domain, and it just adds to the confusion, not just for us and as Canadians, but also to our allies. And we're hearing from places like the State Department, like some of our allies that are in the fight against ISIS, are telling us that they don't know what we're doing next, and it really does add to confusion. And as we saw just this week, the Dutch commit to taking their F-16 fighter jets into bombing into Syria now that Canada is withdrawing.
Okay, last word to you, Randall Garrison, then I got to wrap it up.
Well, we've got some very big disagreements here. One is with what an immediate halt means, which is what the Liberals were promising in the campaign. They're obviously not doing that. We've got another disagreement on the basis of Islamic State, and I'm very concerned if the government actually believes they're just a criminal organization with a religious veneer. That really underestimates the power of the religious ideas of the Islamic State. And the third thing is on effectiveness. And what we've said all along is this campaign isn't working. So we have to get busy trying to cut off the arms supplies, cut off the finances, and cut off the supply of foreign fighters. And that's how you'll defeat ISIS.
But let me just go back to John McKay on one last point. If you're saying they're a criminal organization with a religious veneer, are you saying that they are not terrorists or that they are that?
No, I don't. I think you could be both, really. Okay. You could be a criminal organization. If you look at their organizational structure, they work on the basis of terror. Yeah. They work on the basis of criminality. They work on the basis of all kinds of things that you see terrorist criminal organizations do. And unless you approach it with a different set of eyes, we're just going to carry on. The bombing has been very effective, but you can't actually get into Mosul with the bombers. You have to actually have people on the ground, and I think that's our contribution, is to train those people on the ground and to provide really decent intelligence. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. There was lots to talk about. We could talk a long time, but we'll leave it there for now. John McKay, James Bezan, and Randall Garrison, thank you all very much.
Thanks, Rosemary.
Great. Thanks, Rosie.